welcome to another weekly webinar here at Route Consultant focused on the bread industry. My name is Josh Gregory. I'm the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. And if you've never been here, never been to any of our webinars, these are really designed as places for all of us to come together, learn about the space, ask questions. And if you decide it's something that's interesting for you, hopefully we can help you kind of proceed with that journey, find the right fit for you, and move more quickly than you would otherwise. Now, the way that this is going to work is I'm going to go over some content. Stephen and I are going to go over some things today, and then we will get to a Q&A at the end. So if you are here live on the webinar, it will be an open Q&A. If you have any questions about what we talk about today or anything about the industry, my only request of you is that if you have those questions, put it in the Q&A button at the bottom of the window, or I will miss it. So if you want those questions answered, make sure you use that Q&A button at the bottom of the window. So we've gone through a bunch of things over the past few weeks as we've introduced this industry. So if you haven't seen any of those, we have those all on YouTube and you can go back and watch those. But today we're going to talk about one of the things that should be constantly on the mind of anyone who's a business owner, which is contingency planning. So what happens when things go wrong? What are my backup plans to make sure that my business stays on track? And so to help with that discussion, we've brought Stephen Ryan back on to help share his expertise. So Stephen, if you just want to jump on, and for those who've never met you before, if you just want to give a 2-second background on yourself and how long you've been in this industry.
Hey, Josh, it's great to be back with you. I have been in the grocery space for almost 20 years. I've worked briefly as an employee of different companies and then went on to purchase my first route in 2007 and have owned multiple routes since then. So I have ran routes myself. I have run into these contingencies as an owner operator, and then I've moved on to hire drivers and now manage the operation, cover vacations. And really this is the fun part because this is a great business. The challenge is just overcoming these owner operator obstacles, getting vacation time off, when you wake up sick, when there are some variables that you need to overcome. Having a team in place really makes this business attractive.
Yeah. Now, let's start, though, at the simplest level, because I know there are lots of people who are already in this space or looking to get in this space and thinking of it as just purely owner-operator model. So if that's the world you're living in, what does it look like if you wake up sick one morning? What happens? What kind of things can you do? And what kind of penalties are there if you don't show up?
Sure, great question. So this really starts with understanding the nature of the route that you own and the products you sell and the customers that you're servicing. And this is really where you start to see a lot of differentiating points between contracts, between your premium, your Pepperidge Farm cookie routes, and some other more demanding routes. There's just not as much product pressure on a Milano cookie as there is, say, a route that is servicing a fast food restaurant where if they run out of hamburger buns, their whole business model really shuts down. And so they're completely reliant on you for their business to continue moving forward. And so in evaluating contingency planning, you need to understand the nature of your business. So if you have just serviced a store on a Monday, it's going to be a lot easier if you wake up sick on a Tuesday to find someone to build a display for you, to merchandise product, work back stock. If you have great relationships with the stores, if you're consistent, this doesn't happen very often. A lot of times, simple communication with them, they can help cover some of that. They can build a display for you. They have staff in place that can kind of cover that, as long as it's not, like I mentioned, a consistent issue. So there's some variables there in play that really show the value that a premium route brings versus more of your entry-level route that's a great building block to start in this industry.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is, or at least could be something everybody needs to think about, is that you may be used to thinking, I want to have the right relationship with the company like FedEx, but it sounds like, there are relationships at the bakery level, but really you need to work on cementing those relationships at the store level.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So store level relationships, even employees that work at the store, you can have someone that can merchandise for you before or after they clock in at the store. So there's someone that's already coming there every day. And that's a great avenue to have some backup resources. Relationships with other drivers. It's not something that can be long-term, but if you have great relationships with them, you have another guy at the depot that has a slow day and he can come over and and cover some of those variables on your side, having that relationship is huge.
Yeah. Now, I don't really know, and you can maybe kind of outline it, but what's kind of the bad side if you miss 2 days in a row? Is it that the bakery comes down on you? Does the store put pressure on you? Where do you kind of feel the hot water, just so that people know what happens and why it's so important to plan for these contingencies?
Yeah, it's both ends. So really, Walmart is our major customer, and if they are not, operating in a way that they can fulfill their customers' orders, that starts trickling down. Not to mention, we're dealing with a short shelf life product, and if you're not out there working, you have product at the bakery, it's starting to pile up. You're not getting it out in market. Everything is starting to backlog, and it can really have some downstream effects. 7, 10 days out, since everything is operating on a forecast. We really need to be consistent with freshness in the market, with in-stock conditions, and making sure that we're servicing our stores.
Yeah, and is there some kind of process where you could ultimately lose your contract? So, how bad does it have to get before you get to that level?
Yeah, so it's going to take a lot to get to that point. You're really going to have to stop showing up. Remember, these companies, they're not in the business of taking routes. They want consistency. And so the only avenue they really have to push back on poor services is a breach of contract letter. And it's going to take multiple of those. You're going to have lots of conversations before it's going to get to the point where they're threatening to take a route back. But, as owner operators, as independent contractors, they can't really tell us a whole lot about how to run our business due to the nature of these relationships. And so the only way they can have us, pivot, make sure that we are meeting their expectations to the customer is through a breach of contract letter.
Yeah.
And typically with those, you're going to see a 48 hour to 5 day window with a process to rectify the issue, and then everything goes away. But like I said earlier, if you're a good trunk contractor and you have a long-standing relationship with your grocery managers, with your district managers, these guys are going to work with you. In a lot of ways, they are a resource for you. And so you have a lot of options there.
Yeah, I think that's what's important also to understand is it's not like you miss one day and you lose your contract. This is something where you would have to be just really not doing your job. But that also means that you're not making any money. So, you should be aware of it when it comes to that point. And it's not a great avenue for you if you can't keep this staffed either, if you're not interested in doing it. Now, I know that if you're purely owner operator, you might be driving every day, but were there ever times where even when you were an operator, you started to look at like part-time drivers, you started to get into that side of things before you went fully off the truck?
Yeah, absolutely. As you learn your route, as you better understand market conditions, the variability week to week, promotional schedules, holiday sales, you can start to work around, kids' soccer games, weekend travel plans, and it's easy to give a guy maybe a 2 day work schedule and plan out your product allocations and then send him out to service the stores on your behalf. It's a lot harder to forecast that out on a 2 week schedule and take a whole bunch of time off. And so those are the difficult parts about being an owner operator. You are the business. And so there's a lot of internal knowledge that you have that's just inherent to the nature of your route that is hard to pass off to a guy part-time.
Yeah. Yeah. So it can be a spot fix, but usually when you start to get the relief is when you've kind of grown to the point where you bring on somebody completely to run the vehicle for you, right?
That's right. And really this is a great, employee retention thing where as you learn the route, you know what to expect every day. It's also great job security because just through the nature of the business, it's really hard to manage this from a corporate level just because there's such big swings in the grocery business dealing with a fresh product. And brands, they really want to make sure that their product is growing, and having an independent with a vested interest in the sale of that product, the growth of these routes is really a win-win relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes total sense. Now, you kind of touched on it, but how hard is it to actually develop relationships with others at the depot, other independents? Do you see them regularly every morning and it's easy to start up those conversations, or is it difficult to start to build those?
Yeah, so most of the time you're in and out of the depot. You're there interacting with management, with other owners, and so we all go through the same stuff. And so conversations are typically pretty easily found, and there's common ground amongst other independents, and it's a great breeding ground for you to foster some conversations of this is how I'm doing it. I'm really finding some great successes. I tried this and it didn't work. And so you can, bounce ideas off each other and really kind of grow as a team, even though, they're operating a couple counties over.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so that's good. And I think it's, how difficult is it, if you're bringing in somebody else to help you for the day, like, is it hard to reconcile payments? Is it a complicated back and forth, or is it really just, hey, here's the what I'll pay you for the day type thing?
Yeah, not difficult at all. You can, pre-write orders in whatever capacity you want to do that. The most important thing is making sure someone understands how to invoice the handheld, and they're charging with the handheld. They're charging the stores accordingly. That's really going to have an impact on your settlement.
Yeah, making sure that they know the way the stores expect it, because like we talked about, those store relationships are important. So even if it's only for a day, you want to make sure somebody doesn't come in and just do exactly what the store hates or anything like that. I've heard too of contractors or drivers that'll just basically go around doing vacation routes for people, where basically they'll just say, hey, I'll do your thing for a week so you can go on vacation. Have you ever worked with somebody like that or seen that in your depots?
I have seen that. I haven't personally had any experience, but there are guys that float around typically because there's not a whole lot of them. They do get booked out pretty often. And so you need to plan ahead, whether that's 6, 8, 12 months in advance. But having a guy that understands, Pepperidge Farm, Bimbo, Flowers, they understand the product, they know the handheld, they can step in and they can do a great job, and you can walk away and really get some R&R, some time with your family, some vacation that you wouldn't have otherwise, and not have to worry about, coming back to a mess.
Yeah, so for any of you who just decide that you love a particular bakery and are great with traveling, that could be an opportunity of just becoming, I'll vacation around, go wherever anybody needs me, and fill in that need anywhere, and probably get paid pretty well on a week by week basis because you're filling a need. But yeah, for the most part, I think it's you're either kind of providing your own contingency of having a part-time, or you've gotten to the point where you have, another driver that can step in for you while you're, out for whatever amount of time you need to be. So that's the people side. So that's the one side of contingency. If a driver calls out or if you're sick. Now, what happens? Can you just kind of walk through a day where a truck breaks down? What your thought process is and how you handle it?
Yeah, once you handle the people side, the truck side is easy. If you have a guy out that's in a truck, it breaks down. You have product, it's on site. It's usually as simple as a quick call to a U-Haul store, a Penske store. A lot of Home Depots will have moving trucks available that you can rent, and so these are going to be in your market. These are in your territory that you can usually have access to, and even in a worst case scenario, go back to those relationships at the depot. If there's a guy that has a spare truck, an extra truck, or is able to lend you his at the end of the day when he's finished his route, the stores are going to give you some flexibility. If you're a consistent contractor, they know they can rely on you. Even if you're delivering outside of store hours, out of DSD receiving hours, a quick call, a conversation, letting them know what's happening, they're going to work with you. They're going to receive the product even if it's after hours.
Yeah, and it comes back to what you've said before. Sometimes your best contingency plan is just to have a good relationship on the front end, so that when things break, you can just say, "Hey, it's broken. I'm working on it," and they trust you to fix it. So, I think that's very different than some of the other spaces we talk about, some of the other industries where there's more of a kind of restrictive regulation on exactly what you have to do. So that's good to hear too. Did you ever run spare vehicles? Do you think that's kind of necessary? Or do you think the just picking up a U-Haul is more valuable than trying to have a spare vehicle at all times?
Yeah, so I do personally keep a spare for the nature of my business, the product that we sell, the size and the weight of it. I really need a big lift gate. And so that is not something that is necessary. Certainly, we could overcome that with a U-Haul. It would be very labor intensive. It would slow us down a lot. And at this point, I find more value in having a spare vehicle to keep the consistency. but it's not necessary. So if you want to start out small, U-Haul is a great option to keep your expenses down. But as you grow, if you're a multi-route owner, 8, 10 routes, you really want to have a spare truck available so that you are not beholden to the availability of a rental. And you can really retain employees that way if they're not having to wait on the side of the road for 4 hours for you to go find and source a rental, bring it to them, swap product out of the old truck, get it towed. If that's a consistent issue, you're going to have a hard time keeping people.
Yeah, and especially if it's heavy loads where not only are they waiting and then getting a new vehicle, then it's extremely labor intensive to transfer that product. So I think that's a great point that if you have any kind of specific equipment needs that maybe U-Hauls don't, as a standard have attached to their rental vehicles, that's a more justified reason of having that spare vehicle. And would you store that spare at the depot or somewhere else?
Yeah, the depot is a great spot. It's usually a central location. Some guys can even utilize that spare vehicle to generate revenue in the evening. So maybe that's, parked at your home, parked at a super center, a Walmart with permission, and it's, running a freight load overnight during the day. It's doing things to generate revenue, but still being available to you if needed.
Perfect. So let's talk about the kind of the last side of the contingency planning. So, we've talked people in trucks, but one of the big other sides of this is the inventory that you have to take care of. So what happens if, you've done everything you need to try to properly predict what the inventory is going to look like and you get it wrong? What happens there? And maybe talk through both, what happens if you order too much and what happens if you don't order enough?
Yeah, so it happens, and I've done it. So I've been on both sides of these equation, and it's much easier to overcome too much than not enough. So I've had situations where, I've walked into a store on a Tuesday when we're usually building displays, and they say, "Hey, your end cap is ready," and I completely forgot to order the product. And so maybe I missed that promotion, and I have to scramble. And this, like we've talked about, comes back to the relationships. Can you move product around? Can you grab it from one store, making sure that they're in stock, but maybe a little bit lighter than they would normally be so that you can cover, 1, 2, 3 days to adjust your orders? Can you get product from other distributors? Can you find ways within your territory to reallocate your inventory levels to make sure that you meet the customer expectation, adjust your orders, whether that's 3, 4 days in advance to make sure that you have enough coming in for, your busiest time, your weekends. And really, if this is an ongoing issue, that's where you're going to have trouble getting displays in your stores. And so if they know that they can count on you, they're going to allocate you space, it's going to be full and you're not going to be a problem. That's where those relationships are really successful.
Yeah, and that's not just like, let me continue to have consistent revenue. That's those end caps and those displays are ways that you get more revenue, that you really boost your products and get paid more because you're selling more. And if you know that you've got those on a consistent basis, you can order more, push more, and you get paid per product. So it's a big deal to both have those relationships and to consistently fulfill what they expect of you. Now, you talked a little bit about moving inventory around. How do you kind of prioritize what are your top stores that you want to make sure you keep the happiest?
Yeah, as you buy these contracts, you're going to get a 52-week breakdown of the store sales for each store. And obviously, your busiest stores are the ones you want to prioritize. Not that, the little guy is any less important, but in contingency planning, as you're moving things around, I might start, moving something from a slower store to a bigger store. If possible, my slower store may have less inventory, and so I may be forced to pull product from a bigger store to handle, a promotion that I missed. But you have lots of options. If you can adjust your orders, if you can get product from another distributor, you have the ability as an owner operator to really move things around and do what you need to do to serve the customer. And the really unique thing about this business is, we're a guaranteed sale item. And we're a zero labor cost item to them. So they want to give you end caps. There's no cost to them to sell your product. And so it's an easy sale in that regard, as long as they can trust you and know that you care enough to make sure that their store looks good.
Yeah. And I guess a part of looking good. So I mean, I know under ordering, that's something you often will find out earlier because you'll find out there was a promotion you missed. But if you over order, you may not find out till later in the week. Is that still something that you just kind of shift volume around, or is that something where it just means you have to bring more back to the depot at the end of the week?
Yeah, so again, this goes back to job stability and the unique things about this business where, um, companies want product in stock, but they also don't want too much stale. So those are some variables that we really shine in this business as independent reps. And I would encourage anyone that is thinking about getting into the grocery space to, err on the side of caution and be heavy on the weekend when you need to. And then as you come out of the weekend, if your sell through wasn't as good as you expected, you can adjust your orders on Monday and Tuesday and tail that back, for a Thursday, Friday delivery, and really roll through that inventory appropriately.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the art of this space is the ordering and the merchandising side, which there's only so much we can tell you because a lot of it's going to be dependent on the area you're in, the stores you have, and the part of the country you're in, and that's really going to be part of learning what you are inheriting there and being successful. So I think that's the majority of what we wanted to cover on the contingency side. There's a people, there's a trucks, and there's an inventory part of this equation. The more of it that you can nail, the more consistent you will be. The good thing is, a lot of it, there is some flexibility and there's ways to handle it. And at the end of the day, one of the most important things you can have beyond these little contingency strategies is that relationship with the store so that inevitably when something does go wrong, they're going to give you the time and the flexibility to be able to control those variables and kind of get back in the swing of things. And that's going to be one of the most important things to kind of just keep your business healthy and to drive additional revenue at those stores. So it's just worth doing regardless. Even if you're not on the truck, I think you've seen, Stephen, where there are, routes where you're not driving every day, but you still work to build those relationships yourself, right?
Absolutely. So, as the owner, we're the first line of defense. We're the face of the business, and it's important to the store managers to know who they're working with. And so they might not see you on a daily basis. There may be a driver or a route merchandiser that's representing you, but having that relationship, having that face, who they know they're working with, it really goes a long way.
Yeah, perfect. So that's your contingency plan, and that's what everybody needs to be thinking about in this space for when things go wrong. Now, if anyone has any questions, this is your chance to type them in. Otherwise, I'm going to kind of be going through my spiel at the end. So you've got about 30 seconds as I'm talking if you want to type them in. So type fast. Now, if you've never been to these, again, we'll post these every week on our YouTube, so you'll be able to come and see any of the ones that we've already done, and we'll continue to do these each week. So you can continue to just, if this is all you're looking for, you can come keep finding us at this webinar at this time each week. If you do decide, though, that you kind of want to find out more about this space beyond just these weekly calls, we do have a one-on-one live on our website. It's free for you to jump in and review. Soon we will have a digital summit as well for bread that you'll be able to learn, hopefully everything you need to know to kind of make the decision if this is the right industry for you, condensed into one course. And that also comes with some in-person time at our office in Nashville. Now, we also have a couple of ways that let's say you've already decided that you're interested in buying one of these. Maybe you're already in the purchase process on a bread route, or maybe you're already an owner. There are ways that you can work with both us and Stephen to kind of jump in and learn, any kind of operational expertise that you need, solving daily problems with us, and having ways, maybe it's to value a listing you're looking at or do some kind of profitability analysis on the business you're already running. There's a bunch of different ways that we can work together. So if you have questions on any of that, you can reach out to info@routeconsultant.com and we can help you kind of take that next step. Now, quickly, we got a couple of Q&As that popped in, Stephen. So here's the first one. So what types of clients do you normally see on these routes? So kind of what are the types of stores that you see beyond Walmart? I know that's kind of the top of the funnel, the top tier, but what are the types of stores you can service?
Yeah, great question. So usually what you're going to see is big box retailers, and that's going to be different depending on the market that you live in. But any major grocery chain are going to have relationships with these bakeries, and they're going to expect distribution within their stores so that they have representation to just about every client that walks through. Beyond that, a great way to grow is through convenience stores, C-stores, Walgreens, CVS's, mom and pop shops. There are lots of smaller grocery chains that do not have distribution. They're typically more of your outliers, as well as, let's see, catering companies. So there's a little more variability there. It's going to start with a relationship. Maybe they have a wedding or a barbecue, a birthday party, and you're their go-to bread source. So those are some ways that you can grow your business that are outside of a contract, but you can really kind of add on volume thinking outside the box.
And I think too, places like schools and hospitals, some of those have bread route contracts as well. Isn't that true?
That is true. Yes. Prisons, schools, retirement homes, some of them are built into contracts.
Yeah. So Jesse, the kind of the important thing to know is you have a territory. And so essentially anything when you have the business, when you buy a business, you'll know what stores are a part of that territory, what stores are already a part of your contract that you're delivering to. But basically anything within the territory is yours to potentially add on as an additional stop. You just kind of have to decide if that incremental revenue is worth it for the expenses to go to those places. But those are things that you can add on as long as they want the bread from your company. And so conversations with any of those types of stores are ways to add revenue within your existing territory. And so there are, all kinds of different options like Stephen walked through for what could fall in that territory.
And another quick note there. So outside of those major contracts with your retailers, you have pricing flexibility to go up and down on your margin.
Yeah. Yeah. Because those big stores are negotiated at the bakery level, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So you can't tell Walmart that you're going to change their pricing, but all those other ones, you do have control to kind of decide, hey, if I'm going to service you, this is the pricing I'll offer. If you want that, then it's good for both of us. And so those types of things you get more control over to decide how you want to deliver to those areas. So next question here from Curtis. So I think what you're asking is, if you're looking at an overall business and looking at the revenue at the top line, how to separate, the expenses and the income. That's where we're going to come in, and we're happy to help on any of that. So if you have one that you're looking at or have questions on, we're happy to kind of dig into an existing business, because I hear you. Sometimes all you get is the weekly revenue. And so really what we're trying to help you think through is, if you're servicing it yourself, how much potentially will you have to take home? If you're paying someone, how much will you have to pay, and how much will that leave you, to help think through that kind of thought process of what that bottom line is going to look like, what your take home will look like each week and month and year, and what that means you should ultimately pay for that business. So we'll do that on any of our listings, obviously, but any listing you're looking at, whether, if it's outside of our brokerage or anywhere that you're seeing one, we're always happy to look at that and help on the valuation side, and ultimately, hopefully help you be successful in the acquisition and operation of that route. Another one here from Jesse. So asking kind of about product expiration. So how long before they typically expire? And then, how hard is it to try to stay on top of expiring products at a store level? Is that something that is going to be a daily task? How hard is that?
Yeah, great question. Usually in the bread space, we see 7 to 10 days shelf life, with the expectation that you're not going to run it right up to that sell by date in the store. And so most companies are going to have an expectation that you pull it 2 or 3 days before the sell by date, just to make sure that the customer doesn't it doesn't tarnish the brand reputation. If you buy a product, you take it home, and then the next day it's already out of date. Certainly there's nothing wrong with it, but just the nature of the business, if you're paying a premium for a product, you want to make sure that it's in date when the customer brings it home and is consuming it. It's not difficult to stay on top of stale as long as you're adjusting your orders. That's a huge thing. You need to be in your stores regularly, or the driver needs to be in the stores regularly, and then adjust for those ebbs and flows. Like we talked about, this is a great way to, have conversations with managers and say, this is winning, this is, struggling. And so how can we overcome some of these things? But stale is a part of the business. And if you're not pulling stale, you're usually not putting enough product out. And so you want to really manage that. But as long as you're consistent with it, it won't be an issue.
And can you talk just quickly? I know it's a long conversation, but how do bakeries treat stale? Can you bring how much can you bring back? And are there things you can do with that stale product?
Yeah, each contract is going to have stipulations on when it should be returned, with how many days it should be returned, and you're going to receive credit on that from the bakery. Some contracts are purchased inventory, and there is no stale credit unless it's below a guaranteed product date. So if you're purchasing product and they guarantee that you're going to have 30 days on it to sell, and it comes in below that date, then you can request credit for it. But most of your bread companies are going to offer credit for all stale product as long as you're operating within those parameters.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the thing to understand. And it's a longer conversation. We can talk about it on another one, but stale is going to be a daily thing that you're trying to manage and make sure that you're not having too much. And as long as you're within certain limits, it's okay to bring some stale back and you'll be fine. And every bakery, every contract's going to handle that a little bit differently. So that's also going to be an important part of evaluating which type of contract and business you're looking at and the things that you'll have to stay on top of to make sure that you're not overcoming that limit and running into additional expenses there. All right. I think that is the end of our questions. So like I was saying earlier, we've got a bunch of different ways you can engage with us. If you just have questions and are trying to figure out the next way to proceed or the next thing that you need to do to figure out where you want to go in this space, easiest way is to just reach out to us again, info@routeconsultant.com. And just whatever your question is, if you're trying to get a hold of me or Steven, just put it there. We'll make sure that we get your answer as soon as possible and we'll talk through it. But other than that, like I said, we're going to be here every week. Steven's going to be here every week. So Steven, again, thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise and knowledge.
Thank you all. I'll see you next week.
Perfect. See everybody next week.